Tazria is very interesting. I find it very interesting for a number of reasons. This talks about childbirth. It begins with the idea of, remember, we've been talking all along about this concept of tuma and tahara, which is different, are the Hebrew words for something that is spiritually pure and something that is spiritually impure. People often translate it poorly as spiritually clean and not clean. But there's nothing to do with cleanliness here, and it gives a connotation of negativity, because a person, let's say you have a person in the ancient times walks down the street and finds a dead body. So it's one of the biggest mitzvahs to bury a person like that. I don't mean you have to bury him without telling anybody, but it's a big mitzvah that if a person is left and they have no one to bury them, for you to do it. However, if you come into contact with the dead, you become spiritually impure. Right? All it means is that you can't do certain things that you are required to be pure for, like going into the temple. Right? It's not a question of good or bad, or someone who is better or worse, because here you have someone who did the greatest mitzvah of burying someone, and yet they become impure. So it really has nothing to do with someone doing something good or bad, where they might be pure or impure in a physical sense, right? Like somebody, let's say, is physically dirty or physically does not take care of their hygiene. That's a negative. This has nothing to do with negative, positive. It's just a state. You're in this state at this time. So a person who's in the state of spiritually impure is not able to go into the temple or offer sacrifices. A person who is spiritually pure is allowed to. Now there are other aspects that have to do with it, but we have to understand from the beginning, and this has been in the Parsha now for the last few weeks in different ways. It has nothing to do with good or bad, right? Good, bad, nothing at all. It just has to do with that reality. And we're going to explain how it works in a minute when we get to the case of humans. Because up until now, we've been dealing with all types of pure and impure food. We call it kosher and not kosher, right? A Jew can only eat this food that is spiritually pure in one way. And so that's why it's in this section. It talks about, we just read it last week, about kosher. And we have also the whole idea of Metzora, where the person gets a spot on their house or on their body for doing something wrong, which we'll explain when we get there. And that is God sending a message to the person that they have to help themselves. So it doesn't mean that they're bad or good. It means that if they listen, then they're very good, because most people don't listen when they do something wrong. They deflect it. So we'll see what I mean, because here it's going to talk about what happens to a woman who gives birth. So it says, the first line, Vaydaber Hashem b'Moshe lemor, Daber el bnei Yisrael, say the following to the Jewish people. Iksha ki Tazria v'yalda zachar. A woman who brings forth seed, right, literally, or who has a child, v'yalda zachar, and she gives birth to a male. Tama shivas yamim. She is tameh, she is spiritually impure for 7 days. Kamei nidas dosa tisma. Right, she is now set aside, right, from the word nida. We've heard that word before, right? She's set aside due to her being spiritually impure at this time. So that's right. So a woman gives birth to a boy. 7 days she's impure. V'yom hashmini, but on the 8th day, yimo basar laso. She is no longer impure. Now you do the circumcision on the 8-day-old boy. Ushloshim yomim ushloshis yomim. So for 33 days, shloshim yom 30, v'ushloshis yomim, and 3 days, 33 days. Tesha b'dimei tahara. She now is prepared. She becomes spiritually pure. B'chal kodesh lo siga ve'el mikdash lo tavo. So until she gets to that point of 33 days, she shouldn't go into any place holy like the temple. She should not come into contact with something from the temple like a sacrifice. Lo tavo ad malas yom, and she can't go to that for 33 days. So 7 days she's at a higher level of impurity, and 33 days, right? Because the 7 days she's still physically. She's still spotting and she still has blood and so forth. And at 33 days, even though that's over, in the case of a childbirth, she still can't go into the temple. Now, here's where it gets interesting.
3 days off to the 7 days.
No, it's included.
So what's the significance of those numbers? Is there any significance?
to 33? It's such a random number.
Well, many of the numbers have significance. I'd have to look up 33, but 7 does, right? 7 is, 7 in general means something that is natural, but has a spiritual aspect. Like Shabbos is a day, it's a natural day, God created the world, but it has a spiritual aspect to it, right? 8 means something that is beyond normal spirituality. That's why you had 8 days of Hanukkah, 8 days for bris, right? It's something that is not the norm. Like you would not normally think that it's a spiritual act to cut off a piece of a person's body, but it's a very significant act, right? So 30 is also renewal, because every 30 days there's a new moon. So we always use that when we talk about 30. It always deals with renewal, with something coming back. And the 3, I'm not sure, but certainly it's based on the renewal, because now what's happening is she's giving birth to a child. After 30 days, look at menstruation. It's every 30 days, because a woman's cycle of her ability to get pregnant is renewed every month, right? And then the inability from the death, so to speak, of the fetus, not the fetus, of the egg, the potential of the egg dies, and the egg comes out. That's what the blood is, right? It's from the egg. So that happens every month. That's the idea of renewal. So it's something tied to that. But here's where this gets a little dicey, if you're on a simple level. Remember I said she gives birth to a boy. She has 7 days of a higher level of spiritual impurity and 33 days of a lower level of spiritual impurity. Now, in the Nekeva Teled, what if she gives birth to a girl? Vitama Shuvayim Kanidasa. She has to sit on the level of Anita for 2 weeks. Shishim Yom V'Sheshes Yamim. And 66 days, Teshav al Demei Tahara. She has to stay away from all of the holy things. Umbala Shemei Tahara, when she fulfills her days, Lebein or Labas, for a boy or for a girl, Tavi Kevet, then she has to give a sacrifice. It's not a sin sacrifice, it's a sacrifice because of a good thing that happened. So here's what we got. Simple level. You give birth to a boy, all right, that's bad enough. You have 7 days, you have to stay separate. 33 days, you can't go to the temple. But if you have the chutzpah to give birth to a girl, then 2 weeks you have to be separate, and 66 days you can't go into the temple. Now that sounds to me like a perfect example of misogyny. Well, it's misogyny. It's not even sexism, because the Torah is full of sexism. Sexism does not necessarily mean a negative. It means you're judging by gender, right? The Torah is full of judging by gender, but not necessarily judging badly. And watch how this actually works, and you'll see. Here it appears, and this is quoted in some of the post-feminist books as an example of how Judaism is really anti-female and really makes women feel that their bodies are against them. And their own body is a negative, because they gave birth, right, especially to a girl, right, that's the worst thing. Okay, so that's what it sounds like. Now let's go through an explanation, and I think you'll see that this is not apologist at all. This is, I think, makes perfect sense, and it ties into everything we've done, which is why I gave that introduction. When we talk about the laws of Tuma and Tahara, Tuma means spiritual impurity, and Tahara is spiritual purity. And again, I said it has nothing to do with good or bad. It has to do with a spiritual reality. Just like if I say you have blue eyes, you have blue eyes. It's a physical reality. Okay, so now we have levels of this impurity. If a person, for instance, comes into contact with a certain type of, one of many types of insects that are called sharatzim, they will become impure. They're not allowed to go into the temple when they come into contact with one of those bugs. If a person comes into contact with another person who has done something like that, either come in contact with a bug or a dead body or whatever, and I just come in contact with that person who did that, I become impure also, right? Again, it has nothing to do with good or bad. It's just a reality. It transfers, just like bacteria.
You don't always know that you're coming into contact.
But today this doesn't really apply, because today everybody is impure all the time, right? But this was in the days of the temple where it made a significant difference. If you were, for instance, a Kohen, and you were going to go to the temple for your job, and you were not allowed to go in because of the impurity. No, for 7 days, 30 days, right? There are many ways that like going to a mikveh is one way that a person becomes spiritually pure again, right? So now you've got all these various types. The most severe form of tuma, of spiritual impurity, that takes the most effort to rid ourselves of, is coming into contact with a human body after the person died. That's the highest level of impurity. Now, what it's telling us is the following: is that when there is a holiness, let's deal with a simple level, with a woman's menstruation, right? There's a level when a woman's menstruating, she has this level of impurity. It's a very low level of impurity. It's not a serious one, and she comes out of it by going to the mikveh, right? So that and today we do that only because we have mikvahs and because it allows other things, but not because you actually would go into the temple. We can't go into the temple, of course, but let's just see it at that time. It says that she has an egg. If the egg is fertilized, she doesn't menstruate. If it isn't fertilized, the egg will be wasted, so to speak, right? I mean, no one's going to get pregnant every month, right? It's wasted. It does not fulfill its purpose, and it basically dies, even though it's not alive. It becomes spoiled, and then it comes out as blood. So it wasn't used. So, but what was it originally? The egg was a potential human being, right? It was not a human being, but a potential human being. So it had a certain amount of potential holiness within it, right? And when it's not used, so it gets taken out of the body. The holiness that was within the woman, by having this egg in her, dissipates when the egg comes out. In the spiritual world, probably like in the physical world, it hates a vacuum. There's no such thing as a vacuum. So when the holiness from this egg, potential human life, leaves, the spiritual space gets filled with tuma, with spiritually impure, because the lack of the purity goes out, it comes in with impurity. Now that's what happens, and that's why for that period of time a woman is spiritually impure, and by going to the mikvah, it's finished. But it's not a good or bad. It's a question of reality. There was a potential life. The potential life was not fulfilled. Nobody can get pregnant every month. Like I said, it's not a good or a bad that it wasn't fulfilled. A woman who's not married would be probably not very good that it was fulfilled, right? You would expect it not to be. So therefore, but the reality is that when that potential holiness leaves her body, you have a vacuum, it gets filled with tuma. This happens in every case, not just with people, with every instance that the Parshas have talked about until now, objects, animals, humans, everything. If there's a potential for holiness and it leaves, it gets filled with a lack of spirituality, or we would call it tuma, right? Spiritually impure, which can be fixed. One of the lower levels is this example of potential human life, which is found within the egg of a woman. Just the greatest one is the death of a human life, it wasn't potential human life, it was a human, right? And that person, whatever reason it is that they died, right? Good or bad, like they died violently or they died of old age, makes no difference. The body, right, becomes impure, and therefore if you come into contact with it, you become impure. And again, it's got nothing to do with good or bad, because it's a great mitzvah to prepare someone for a funeral. It's a great mitzvah to go to a funeral. But if you go to the funeral, you're in the room with the deceased, you are going to be impure. Today, as I said before, we're all impure. There's no way for us not to be. But the moment we're born, we're impure because our mothers who gave birth to us are impure from going back for generations. It has no consequence to us. But it's just a spiritual concept. So now, here's what happens. When a woman gives birth to a boy, right? So she has this boy that's within her is a human life, and it has potential to do quite a bit in its life. Therefore, the amount of holiness within her is pretty serious. When it comes out, she gives birth, she's not doing anything wrong, but the vacuum that's left behind gets filled with tuma. That's how the world works, and the baby's born, right? But that's when she gives birth to a human. However, the commentaries tell us what happens when she gives birth to a female. So if you look back at the first female in the world, in the history of the world, was Chava, Eve. All right, what Eve, when she gives birth, right, to the first human being ever created by a human being in the history of the world, right, was Cain. Right? Eve gave birth to Cain. That was the first human being born to a human being. Right? Up until then, Adam and Eve were created by God. They weren't born from a womb. There was no one that they could have been with. But she, right, Chava is the first. So what does she name her child? Cain. But what does that mean? It means, comes from a quote that she says, Kanisi ish es Elokim. I created a person like God. I'm godlike. God created people. I create people. Right? That's what she's saying. I am a creator. A female and the male are very different. One of the things about a female that's very different from a male is that a female is a creator. Yes, she needs a male to help, to facilitate it, but the two roles are not even. All right? The man is simply a catalyst. The woman creates the child. So she says, I created, that's what the word Cain means. I created man as God does. I am godlike. That's what she's saying, and that's appropriate. Like she's not. Nobody thinks that that's a negative. It's a reality. She is. So now a woman gives birth to a boy. She gives birth to a human being. So when he leaves her body, a certain amount of unholiness, right, this impurity enters her body. But when she gives birth to a girl, she's creating a creator, and the spiritual potential of a creator, on a very basic level, not taking into account at all who she is, her personality, her gifts, her weaknesses, her strengths, her environment, leave it all aside. The simple potential of a creator, which is a female, is much greater than it is for a male. The greater the potential, the greater the vacuum, the greater the vacuum, the greater the impurity. And therefore, if you become impure at the lowest possible level, let's use menstruation as an example, because what are you losing is a potential life, not even a life, right? Maybe this egg would be fertilized. It didn't happen, so that's gone. So now that potential holiness goes out, and a certain amount of impurity comes in, and it goes away after a week. That's the end of it. When it comes to, that's the bottom rung. The top rung is a human life, right? When someone dies. Close to that rung, because you're dealing with now an actualized human who's being born, right there, that baby, when they're born, as long as they're taken care of, will become an adult. Right? As long as nothing weird happens to it, the normative baby becomes an adult. So therefore, that baby is going to become an adult. If it's an adult male, so then he'll do whatever men do. But if it's an adult female, she's a creator. And a creator has the potential to create other human beings, which means that's a higher spiritual level. Therefore, when the female is born, the vacuum is greater because the holiness was greater, right? More holiness when you create a creator than when you create a facilitator. And therefore, when that leaves, the amount of spiritual impurity or tuma that enters the female for a male is half as much as when she has a female. What appears to us originally to be a penalty, right? If you have the audacity to have a girl, we're going to punish you and make you sit outside for 60 days. But listen, if you have to have a child and you have a boy, at least that's only half bad. You only have to sit outside for 30 days. That's what it appears like to the casual reader. And you see this written, like I said, in some of the post-feminist books that I've come across, right? You know, ever since like the early 80s, late 70s, they use this as one of the proofs that Judaism, right, has a fear of females. It's anti-female, it has a fear of blood rituals when it comes to menstruation, up to birth, right? There's blood in both cases. And it's all based on the fact that they're just translating the words, but they're not looking at the concept. There's a reason why when we started discussing this concept 3 weeks ago, we started with inanimate objects. We went from inanimate objects to living creatures like bugs, from that to animals, right? From animals to humans. We're progressing. And then we go within humans, we start with giving birth to a boy to giving birth to a girl. It's a progression. Just like the progression, it's the exact same progression of why we see in the Torah, where God creates first bugs, right? Objects, bugs, plants, bugs, and then finally humans. But humans is man, then female, right? Female is the last thing created, right? And if you see, it's a hierarchy. And now I'm not trying to be apologist. The Torah in many places, but first the idea that basically, to use the slang of our time, we would say that, when a man is born, he's a man, but when a woman is born, she's a human. Right? The woman makes a man human. Right? Just look at what a guy is like. Go to a yeshiva dorm one day, and you'll see the guys don't even know how to clean themselves properly, and then they get married, right? And it changes. I can give you examples, but we're being recorded. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but there are, and I know lots of examples of guys who just can't take care of themselves. Now, of course, there's women like that as well, but it's not the norm. And this is, of course, just a funny example. But but the fact is that we see in the Torah that there are hierarchies. And if you want to follow it through, you're going to see sometimes in certain areas you're going to find a man is placed superior to a woman as the species, so to speak, or the gender, and other places the woman is higher. Here you clearly see that by virtue of the fact that she has a female, with nothing to do with that female, who she is, what she looks like, what her intelligence is like, how hard she works, what her environment is, what she ends up as, at this point makes no difference. By virtue of the fact that she's a female, she has a greater spiritual potential than the male. And therefore, when the mother gives birth to her, the vacuum is greater, and therefore the spiritual impurity entering the mother will be greater because no vacuum remains. It has to be filled with something. It gets filled with this impurity. It takes her twice as long to get rid of it. Right? So instead of it being what it looks like, a penalty or some type of an insult, it's not meant as a compliment either. It is a fact of reality, how Judaism looks at the birth of a human, of a male, and of a female, and it sees it differently. So that's why it's written that way.
Would it have, I'm not saying it had anything to do, but like with the male, for her to be at her son's bris, normally taking into an 8-day bris, would it mean that she should be pure to be at her son's bris? Or
I think there is definitely a relationship between the 7 days of her being at the level of a nida and the bris being the 8th day. That's why it puts it together, because we already had the commandment of bris earlier. He's just repeating it. I think there's a relationship. I don't think the relationship means so that she can be there or not be there, because I would bet then, just like when I was a kid, that mothers probably weren't there a lot of times. Because I remember, and if anyone who's from here, they probably remember, I remember going down to Sinai Hospital for brises, and the mothers were not there. They were in the hospital. You go all the way to the hospital just so the mother can be there, and the mother's not there because they're in bed. I mean, I know my mother told me she was in the hospital for more than a week when she gave birth to us, and they did not have cesareans. That was normal birth. So, today it's changed. I mean, there are a lot of things changed with that. I know that when I tell people that my father was out of town for the birth of my two brothers, they think he must be a terrible guy. But it was normal, because what were they going to do there, right? All right, so you take your wife to the hospital, right? You take her back from the hospital. That's very nice. So back from the hospital is a week later. To the hospital, I can understand. But you couldn't go in. You weren't allowed in the room. You weren't allowed in the back. You had to sit in a waiting room and smoke cigarettes, right? And kill yourself, right? So you walk around reading magazines for 10 hours. So it was very common that men didn't go. Society changed that way. And it also changed that women, right, they got general anesthetics. And they were probably very strong, the general anesthetics. They're probably much stronger than we do today. And because of it, they were in the hospital for a long time, right? And that is even, like, my wife had cesareans, and she wasn't even in the hospital as long as that, right? And that's already, we're talking 30 years ago. And when it was 60 years ago, they didn't come. So I don't know if it has a relationship spiritually, but I don't think it does physically that she should come. But I think that this is the message, and I think it's a powerful message that it's telling us that one does not normally see, which is Judaism. God does not judge people like in a way that would be like we would call sexist or racist, with a negativity. He judges each person, right, based on their soul's capacity to fulfill their purpose and how much you fulfill. So, for instance, if God creates a boy baby and a girl baby, and 30 years later they meet, and they get married, and they grew up in an environment where they are ignorant. They had no education for whatever reason. And they have very little. So he's not going to judge them the same as somebody with a very vast education, but he will also, based on who they are, God will judge each individual based on their potential and how they fulfill their potential. What did they do with themselves? Right? Did they just wallow and be sad because they don't have this or that? Or did they do their best to try to be good people and make the world a better place with what they had? And if they did, then we can understand that a person who might have, their entire life, they help people because they were in the middle of the country and people's cars would break down and they would just help them fix it and get on their way, while another person becomes the leader of a great nation and changes something, another person cures cancer. They're all great people, but you can't say which one might be judged as fulfilling themselves more. It could be the person who had nothing, right, was more actualized as a person than the one who cured cancer, because the one who cured cancer might have been lazy and he could have cured cancer and something else, but he didn't use his potential. We just don't know. We have no way of knowing. That's the bottom line. But what we see here is that the potential that a person has, in a general sense, we see that God looks at each one differently. Like a woman's potential and a man's potential are different. It doesn't make one better or worse. It means they're different. So you see here that they show it in the most base level. So just at birth, when it seems like there's nothing, you don't know anything about the baby. You don't know anything about the family. It's just birth, right? And that's what it seems to say. Now, interestingly enough, it says here, when we go a few lines down, it talks about the sacrifice. So I said, let's see, it's line 6, right? It says, on the completion of the days of your purity for a son or a daughter, you shall bring a sheep within its first year for an elevation offering, and a young dove or a turtle dove for a sin offering. So first I'll explain, why would she bring a sin offering? What sin did she do? So the Talmud says, interestingly enough, that when the woman is in pain, she will often say things that she doesn't mean, or she might mean and she wouldn't normally say. And the Talmud gives an example where she tells her husband, "You're never touching me again," right? Because she's in such pain. Now, that is, under normal circumstances, an oath. She's making a statement, right, as an oath, like, I swear to God, you're never touching me again. It's not beyond possibility, right? So when she makes a statement like that, there's ramifications. When a person speaks, words have power. So therefore, we know that she doesn't really mean it. So then she gives this sacrifice, right? Sacrifices are only given for a sin that you do without intention, right? If you purposely break Shabbos, you don't give a sacrifice for that. You have to repent, right? But if you break Shabbos by mistake, you wanted to do the right thing and you made a mistake, then you give a sacrifice. It's sort of like a vehicle understanding that you had no bad intention, so we're giving you a way out of it that's easier than the depth of having to repent. That's very difficult. Repenting is a hard thing to do. This is right. So in this case, what did she do? She, in the heat of the moment, one of the examples it gives is that she took an oath not to let her husband touch her again. When a couple of days later, she's going to change her mind. Right? That's just an example they give, but that's what they say, and it can only be for something that where the Torah is presuming there's no bad intent on her part. She's just speaking out of the pain. But look what it says here, that she can get what she gives. So it says a young dove or a turtle dove. So what's a young dove or a turtle dove? What's the difference? So it says that the Talmud tells us that normally every place that you find this, where you can offer this bird, it usually will say a turtle dove or a young dove. There's one place in the Torah, it reverses it. In Hebrew, they're different words. So it's very clear. Right? It's not like turtle dove, young dove sound similar. They're literally two different types of birds. So there, it's everywhere else it says turtle dove and then a young dove. And so what's the why? Why does it switch it here? So it says that there's one trait that's different between these two birds, among any whatever else might be different, and that is a turtle dove mates for life. A regular dove does not. The turtle dove will have a mate, and when that mate dies, will never mate again. So if you have a female turtle dove has a male turtle dove as a partner, and the male dies, that female will never mate again. She's right. If it's conscious, not conscious, it's certainly instinct, but it's telling you something about the turtle dove. The idea of the monogamy, of the loyalty, of the relationship between them, even if it's not really existent, but in our eyes, we can see that. We would think that because as humans, we feel that, right? We're monogamous. We have a relationship with a person that means a lot to us, right? Even if if something would happen to that person, we get married again, we know it's not the same. Right? We care for the person, love the person, but it's not the same. There's a difference. So the turtle, or it could be the other way around too, but usually it's that way. So usually it'll say the turtle dove before the young dove, and the reason is because in most cases for the sacrifice it doesn't really matter, mating, not mating. But here we're talking about a woman who just gave birth. This is discussing mating. This is discussing relationship, right? And here the Torah is telling us that. They put the turtle dove last because it mates for life, because you only give one bird. So you're going to cause that other bird to never have a relationship again, so to speak. Right? So to speak. It's not literally true. But you take the mate of the turtle dove, the one left alive will never have a mate again. So therefore, when you're dealing with the case of family, creating family, which is what we're doing here, the Torah says it's preferable to take the dove. If you have a choice, right, they both cost the same, take the dove, because if you take the dove and it's in a relationship, its partner won't care. It doesn't have that capacity. It'll just find another mate. Right? But a turtle dove will not. And in that case, you'll be destroying that relationship. And even though it's only in our mind, because the birds don't really think that way, they have instinct, it's teaching us that lesson. So the commentaries are telling us about how far a person needs to go when they're thinking about the significance of relationships between a man and a woman, or a male and a female if it's a different species. So that says that there. And then it goes on, it talks about what happens if she can't afford it. So she says if she can't afford a sheep, then she should take 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves. You notice it reversed it? Because you're taking 2 turtle doves, therefore there's no partner left behind. Right? And the other case, right before it says dove first, then turtle dove. Here it says turtle dove, then dove. Because it's telling you that idea, that the idea of the Torah is just hinting at that. And now the Torah switches. Now we've gone, like I said, from inanimate objects to organic objects, to animals, to humans, to birth of humans, and now we're going to talk about an adult human who does something and gets some type of a penalty. And here's a concept that is foreign to most of us because it doesn't exist today. What we're going to be discussing today is what is very poorly translated as leprosy. It is not leprosy. Absolutely not. The only similarity why the translators were not Jewish translators, called it that is because the description that the Torah gives is similar to the description a doctor would tell you if you asked them to describe leprosy. What would happen to a person with leprosy? They would get these certain spots on their skin, so the person here gets it. But it's not leprosy. This is a disease that can come and go in 30 days. Right? Leprosy is incurable. Right? It can't come and go. So it's not leprosy, even though you'll find books that'll use that word. So this is a spiritual disease that today human beings do not have the capacity to receive anymore, which if a person does one of a number of sins, God will send them a message. The message will first appear on your home, on your house. You will find a spot on a wall in your house. And then if you don't listen to that, you will find it on your clothing, on one piece of clothing that you're wearing will have a spot. And now these spots will be easy to determine that they're not natural, right? If you don't listen to that, it'll appear on your body. Then you'll find it on your body. Now, the way that they're diagnosed, like, if you wake up in the morning, there's a spot in your house, it could be an oil leak. I mean, it could be a lot of things, even though it's pretty unique what it looked like. So you would get a Kohen. The Kohen was the doctor of spiritual diseases. And the Kohen would come to your house and he'd look at it and he would make a decision. If he says this is this spiritual disease, then your house becomes impure. The same way we talked before. Everything within the house becomes impure, right? And you have to take this as a lesson that you've done something wrong. And it'll tell us what you've done wrong. And you then have to repent for it. And but there's penalties because it's it's already affected your house. So, for instance, what would happen is you wake up in the morning, you find this spot on your house, right? I'm in trouble. I'm pretty sure I did this wrong. So God is sending me a message. You go to get the Kohen. The Kohen will tell you the following: before I come, take everything out of your house, everything out, and put it in your yard. Because as soon as I come and tell you that this is that disease, then anything in your house becomes tameh, becomes spiritually impure. Right now, it's not spiritually impure until I say what you've got. Right? My diagnosis creates the effect. So the Kohen tells them, so do that. When you've done that, come back and get me. So they do that. They come back and get him. The Kohen comes. Let's say he sees it. He says, yes, you have that's what this is. Right? And now the rule is they have to take apart their entire house piece by piece and reassemble it. Now, I'm thinking that their houses were not as elaborate as ours, but they had to do that. They had to take their house apart piece by piece and reassemble the house, and then the house is fine. They also had to atone for what they did. So what is it Talmud say is the sin? We're primarily talking about the sin of lashon hara, about speaking bad about someone else, malicious gossip. Right? That a person who speaks malicious gossip about another person that God says, what you're doing is wrong. You need to fix this. So you are privileged that I'm going to send you a physical manifestation so that you know that you did this wrong, so you can stop doing it. So you can be better at this. So I'm going to send it to your house. You don't want to listen? It's going to show up on your clothes. You don't want to listen? It'll show up on your body. Then you're going to have to listen. Right? That's basically how we see it. Now, why this specifically with the sin of lashon hara? So they say is because the Talmud tells us that many of the times that people speak lashon hara, right, is because that they're small. We call small-eyed. That they're jealous people, and they're seeing someone else who does well, and they say something bad about them. They see somebody who's happy. They say something. I'm not happy in my marriage. You're happy in your marriage. I'm going to say something about it. You're happy at your job. I'm going to say it. You make more money than me. I'm going to say something. I'm small-minded. Right? And the Talmud calls it small eyes. Right? You look like this. Right? You look at a person like you're jealous of them. Right? A person who has a good eye could have an evil eye. Right? That's where it comes from. So that's what they're like. So such a person who's like that also doesn't want to know people what they've got. Right? If I'm going to be jealous of what you got, I want to presume you'll be jealous of what I got. So I don't want you to know what I got. So inside my house, I might have all these wonderful treasures, but I'm not going to tell you, right? So what's the first thing that happens? I have to take everything I own and put it on the lawn. I'm counteracting, right? God is counteracting your personality and showing you have to fix this. We have to put it on the lawn. So all of your stuff's on the lawn, right? Now everybody knows what you got, but not only that, everyone knows you did it, that you've been talking about people, right? What you've done is when I speak bad about someone, I'm trying to ostracize that person. I'm trying to get everyone to say, yeah, look at him. He's a bum. He's cheap. He's not nice. He doesn't treat his wife right. I say things like this, right? True or not true. If I go around saying these things, my goal is to separate him from the community. People shouldn't treat him nicely, so that way I'll be treated better, because that's what I think. So now my house has to be empty, taken out. Everyone knows what I got. Everyone knows I did this. So what happens to me? Now I'm separated. I'm the one who gets separated, not that guy I spoke about, right? I do. The repair is I have to put the house back together, take it apart and put it back together. Now here's an amazing thing. It's a lot of work, right? No matter what your house is like. You have a one-room house, it's still a lot of work, right? So you might say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. If I wait a week, it'll show up on my clothes. So I'll throw away my clothes, right? Better than taking apart my house. So the Talmud tells us that the story of this tsaras is so amazing that when people would take apart their house, they would find treasures in the walls. You'd say, what, I speak lashon hara about someone, I'm going to get punished, and my punishment is I'm going to be a millionaire. What kind of a punishment is that? So this is what happened, is that when the Jews were sent to go to Israel, like Joshua entered Israel, right, with the Jewish people, the Canaanites knew that they were up the creek. That, in comes the Jews, they were powerful. And God told us This is your land. And the Canaanites who wanted to live with us peacefully could stay. The ones who didn't couldn't. And the overwhelming majority did not want to. So what they did is they took their treasures and they buried them into their houses. Because one day we'll come back and get it, right? It's common, right? We have the stories in the Holocaust, people doing this. You take your idols, your gold, your silver, your diamonds, and you put it between the walls of your house, you plaster it up, you paint it, and you leave. The Jews come, they take over the house. They don't know there's anything in it. But when you suddenly you have to take apart your house, you find it, right? So what kind of a punishment is that, right? So the Talmud says it's not a punishment. It's a reward, because it didn't always happen. It only happened sometimes. But it was a reward. Why? Because it's a big deal to take apart your house in order to fix the sin. You can just say, oh, wait till it goes on my clothes. And my clothes, I'll just throw away my shirt. Big deal. What did I lose? Take apart my whole house. Well, so the Talmud says, a person who repents to the point where they realize what they did and they're prepared to pay the price, they'll be rewarded for that. Right? It's just like, you can have somebody, usually it's somebody that we're close to, but in general, you have someone who keeps doing something wrong, right? And you want to help them. You want to tell them, you keep doing this, right? But they don't listen to you. And they just get angry at you, Could you please not park like that? Or please not do this? Or please don't spend your money on this? Whatever it is that you really mean well. It's somebody you care for. In this case that we're talking about, someone you care for, and they just get angry at you and they don't listen. Right? You do it enough times, you just stop doing it, right? Because all I do is make this person, this man, this woman, this child, my parent angry when I do it, right? So I'm not doing any good, so I'm going to stop doing it. So, but what happens if you get someone, let's say a spouse, and you tell them something like this, and they accept it? That means they're a big person, not you. You're a regular person. You're a nice person, but you're a regular person. They're a big person because they just accepted, right, your reprimand. And even they know they love you, whatever, it's still not easy to do. We all know. We've had it happen to us, how hard it is. And they accept it, right? That's a special person. That's what happens here. When the person gets this reprimand on their house, and they got to take apart their house, right, they're saying, okay, I was wrong. You're right. I'm not doing this again. And even though it's going to cost me time and money to do this, I'm doing it now. I'm not going to wait until it's easier. I'm going to do it now. And that's when God says that person's going to get rewarded because they listened. Right? Just like when I go to someone that I care about and I say this, and they listen, they're rewarded because now they're going to have a better life. Or whatever it is they were doing wrong, they're going to stop doing. If I'm correct, that is. Right? So that's what's happening here. So it goes on. There's a number of other interesting parts to this, and rather than just read it, I'll just tell you a few of them. So another one is that, let's say it gets to the point where it's on a person's skin. They've got a spot on their skin because they didn't deal with it the first level or the second level. Now it's on their skin. Now it's very severe. So it says that you have to get the Kohen to come and to judge, right? He is the doctor. He's a spiritual doctor. He comes to judge. So it says that the Kohen comes and he says, okay, if you have this disease, you need to go outside of the community because if people come into contact with you, they'll get it. You go outside the community. You have to live, like they had certain areas right outside the city where they would live. And you stay there. And the next morning, the person comes, wants the Kohen to look at him and make sure that the judgment's right. Excuse me. And the Kohen, he comes, and the person's entire body is a spot. It has this I don't even know what you call it. Like you have a sore, like leprosy. Normally you have a spot here or a spot here, a spot here. The whole body is now covered. First it was one spot, their whole body. The Kohen is he's free. He's done. He can go. Meaning if it's got one spot in one spot, that person is tamei, that person is spiritually impure. You have to go through the whole week, the whole process, the repentance. The person's whole body is covered? No, he doesn't have to. That makes no sense. It's the opposite, right? You think this whole body, he must be such a terrible speaker of Lashon Hara that his whole body is covered with it. Like he let it wait so long because he's belligerent. No, the Torah says the opposite. It actually doesn't. I've seen different commentaries on it, but one of them I found very interesting says That if you have a person who does something wrong, but they're basically a good person, like most people, 99.9% of the people you ever meet, maybe everyone you ever meet, is basically a good person who, for one reason or another, they get angry, they get jealous, they get hungry, they get nervous, they get emotional. Whatever happens, they do something wrong. They don't think it's so bad. Whatever it is, they do something wrong. But when they finally come to the realization that it's wrong, they stop doing it if they can. But in that, most of the time, they're good people. But if you have a person who's really a bad person, who's really, for whatever reason it is, only cares about themselves, will hurt everybody, right, in order to help themselves. Today we might call that person like a sociopath, right? A person with an let's just use the old word, sociopath. You know what that is? A person, it's a disease. But let's say the person wasn't ill. It wasn't mentally ill. They were just like that. That's a person who's got a spot everywhere in his body. There's no helping him, right? That's what I was getting at before. There's no helping this person, so you let him go. There's nothing I can do. No matter what I do, I can't help you. You don't want to be helped. You want to stay this way. You're just totally like that. So the message is that there's no help for you. So this won't work anymore. It's done. So that person can go. But a person who just has a spot has to go through this whole process, right? And it's humiliating. You can imagine how humiliating it is, because when I talk Lashon Hara, right, I do it in private. I go to you and say, listen, don't tell anyone, but that guy over there, right? Forget it. I did it with a camera, and I'm doing it like this, and everybody in the world hears me do it. Because now everybody sees I got it on my house, I got it on my clothes, I got it on my body. That I've been talking bad about somebody, right? And that's really the point. So that today, sadly, our spiritual levels are lower, right? In these days, imagine this question: how is it possible that people could have seen the 10 plagues and the splitting of the Red Sea and then sinned? It would be like, you'd think it's impossible. How could someone do that? How could a person do it? We even asked the question earlier. It says that Esau wants to kill Yaakov. He wants to murder his own brother. So Yaakov sends messengers to him to bribe him. They all different ways, with flattery, with gifts, whatever he can do to try to convince his brother, I'm not a threat to you. Don't try to kill me. So it says that Yaakov sent, it says, Malachim, angels. So the Rashi says, he explains, literally angels. He literally sent angels, not because sometimes the word angel could be a messenger. They use the same word. That I'm sending, a human being as a messenger. I sent one of my guys with a bunch of gifts to give to him. So I sent my messenger. He says, no, I sent an angel. So he said, you think that if Esau gets up in the morning, that's a doorbell rings, opens it up, and there's 2 angels standing at his door saying, listen, please take this gift. Don't hurt our master Yaakov. Right? You think he's going to even have a thought that he's going to do that? Angels are coming to his door, right? And yet he still does. He still entertains killing him. And the people who went through the 10 plagues, they still doubt God. We would never think that. Why is that? Because they were on a much higher spiritual level. On one level, they were able to see things and be involved with spiritual things that are on such a high level that they needed a balance. They needed the ability to still have free will. So if I see God split the sea, I still have to have the ability in my mind to do wrong, because otherwise, why am I here? I mean, God just took away my free will. I'm a robot. I'm just walking around doing whatever God wants me to do, not by choice. Because I know that if I don't do it, I'm going to die. I'll be in the ocean with the Egyptians. So God made it that people on very high spiritual levels have the ability to experience spiritual things and still have the wherewithal to make logical choices for themselves of right or wrong. So you could actually experience something as amazing as being the Red Sea, and then a few weeks later worship a cow, which is exactly what the Jews did. Right? That's possible, because they were on, and therefore they had a much greater capacity for spirituality than we have today. You had prophets then. There are no prophets today. There's nobody who's a prophet today in the world. Nobody who can literally tell you what God says this, and they are always right to every detail. There's no such thing anymore. Nobody does that, right? You can go to 2 rabbis and get opposite opinions. They both might be right, but it's not. But as a prophet doesn't exist, because we don't have that spiritual capacity anymore. We're not on that level. One of the things we lost was these spiritual diseases. there was a time when a person would get a spiritual disease. If you do something, right, wrong, God will send you a message to you. And sometimes it would be in the form of a disease. And then when you repented, the disease would go away. Right? Today they call that faith healing. In ancient days, like the Ramban, who's one of our commentators from the 1400s, he says that the ancients, like the people before his time, they were so amazing that when they would hurt themselves, they would look within themselves and say, what did I do wrong? That's why God is sending me this message. Like I twisted my ankle. And they would fix it. Like they would fix what they did wrong. They would repent, not do it again, and their ankle would get better. He says, but today, this is in the 1400s, I've never met somebody like that. It doesn't exist anymore. So this example doesn't exist today because our spiritual levels have gone down. Right? However, the messages that it gives us are important, are significant about how a person, right, should react to what's happening. But we do believe that God sends us messages. They're just not as obvious, and they're certainly not authoritative. In other words, nowadays we believe that God will send us messages, but if you're not looking for it, you will explain it away without a second thought. But you see, like there's some that are a little more common. Like for instance, say if a community drops a Torah, like you open the Torah on Shabbos and the guy drops it on the floor, right, by mistake, of course. That's a serious message that this community is going the wrong way. They've got to fix something, right? The people say, oh, they have to fast for a month. Fasting isn't the punishment. It's the repenting that the fasting symbolizes. That's what it's talking about. Something's wrong. It says when a guy drops his tefillin, like you unwrapped, right? When they're ready, you're putting them on, you take them off and you drop it. That's God sending you a message. You have to fix something. If you drop your tefillin but they're covered, that means you have to fix something, but it's not as severe. Now, these are all not literal, right? It's not literal. Like we're not like people, superstitious people. But the idea is that God does speak to us, and God will speak to you more if you want Him to, if you look for it, if you understand it, and if you don't, is where it's bad, because what happens is that God will send us messages, but for instance, let's say God sends a message. And the message is a little bit of pain, a little bit. You drop your tefillin. Right? You have to bend down and pick them up, and you feel bad that you dropped your tefillin. Maybe you damaged them, or you twisted your ankle and it hurt for a minute, right? Or the Talmud says even if you reach into your pocket for a coin and you reach into the wrong pocket, it's also a little bit, right? A little bit of inconvenience. That's the smallest level. If you start looking for a message from God, and when these types of things happen, and because of it you improve yourself, so even if you were wrong and it wasn't a message from God, it became one because you improved yourself, right? But if it was a message from God, then God is going to continue to send you these messages because you listen. But it says then that if a person doesn't listen, they don't take these messages seriously at all, then God stops sending them because that's just cruel. Right? You don't send somebody a pain, even a little bit of pain, right, for no reason. That's cruel. God is not cruel. So He stops. This is one of the approaches to the idea of why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people, but bad people don't listen. So that, like, why should I do it? What's the use? I'm going to keep punishing this guy? It's not going to help. So God said, I don't do that. But a righteous person who goes off the path a little bit, I'll send him this message, and he'll listen, and he'll get better. And so that's our form of spiritual sickness, is that we look for those messages, and they're hidden. And like I said, they're not superstitions, so you don't go advertising it. But you say, if something happens, if normally it takes you, you do a carpool, it takes you 15 minutes. Today it took 45 minutes. So you can read into that if you want. Maybe I'm wasting my time. Maybe I should be doing this. And even if it wasn't a message, if you become better because of it, then it's a message, right? By definition. It's like when people come to me sometimes and say, all of my kids got sick one after another. And it's not winter or nothing. I don't know why. What's the message God's sending me? Right? So, they'll always go and say, I'll check my mezuzahs. So that's sort of a cop-out. Right? I mean, it's true. You want to have kosher mezuzahs, but But what'll happen is like this. So I'll say to the person, well, tell me, have you changed in any area? And well, you know what? I used to go, and now that services during the week are so late at night, it's summertime. You don't go to 9. It's hard for me to go out at 9. So I was going all year to services every day, and now I'm not going. And so maybe that's a message. Maybe you should try harder and come twice a week and see, right? So the person goes and he comes twice a week. And his kids are going to get better inevitably anyways, right? They're not going to keep getting the cold in the summer over and over and over again. So they get better. So now he goes to heaven. Is God going to, and God says to them, why did you get better, when your kids were sick like that? Well, because you're sending me a message that I had to go to shul. He says, no, that wasn't the message. I was sending you a message that you should say blessing better. Right? So he blew it? No, he didn't blow it. Because the point is, God sent him a message. What's the message? To be a better person. Are you a better person? Yes, I'm a better person. Then that's what the message was. Because we're not prophets. God, right? God doesn't come to me and say, through the prophet, you did this wrong, you fix it this way. It doesn't happen. So I have to look for it. And even if I'm wrong, I'm right. Right? That's the point. So that's what this is dealing with. That's this week of Tazria. We only just touched it, but the second Parsha, right, there's 2 Parshas this week of Mitzorah. Mitzorah is literally the name of the spot. It's called Mitzorah, comes from the word saras, right?
That's where we get Taurus from.
Yeah, same, there's no question. I'll tell you just one odd one, as we're concluded. That the word saras means trouble, right? Saras is a spot of trouble, right? That's what you have, a spot on your skin of trouble. Do you know what the name? Back in the days when the Talmud had, it said that the Torah allows men to have many wives, right? You see in the Torah, right? The rabbis forbade it because it didn't work. There was too much jealousy and fighting. They said you can't do this anymore. Every person has one spouse, right? Even if you had many wives, you usually only had one who was your partner, and the rest, for whatever reason, you had them. There were lots of reasons why they could have done it. In any case, the rabbi said you couldn't do it anymore. But let's say it was still going on. So in the days of the Talmud, right, they go through various relations. You have your brother, your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, your mother-in-law. So what did a wife call the other wife? Like, what was the name in Hebrew that they would call each other? Like, in my house, I have 3 sons, so they were brothers. So he would say brother, right? Theoretically, he would call him brother. So what did the wife call the other wife? Literally, what was the name? So the word was Sarah, which means my pain. Literally, it means my pain. Because no matter how well-meaning the man might be, like you live in a world where men were killed in war, and there were literally 5 women for every man. And the rabbi got up and said, listen, we've got to take care of these women. You can't just let them live in the streets. They need partnership. They need a relationship. They need a life. So every man needs to marry 2 women. Now, let's say they said that, all right, where everything was done for a good reason. It wasn't done for lust. It wasn't done to belittle someone. It was done for a good reason. Nevertheless, the reality was it was painful for the women to have more than one wife, even if they got along, even if they liked them, even if they helped each other, even if their life was better. You could have one's having a child and 3 are accountants. You're making a lot of money, right? Who knows why? But they still called them that. The same word, saras, right, is the spot on your body. Saras is trouble, and Sarah is a sister wife, and it's not coincidental. It's because of that. So I guess we'll stop with that. But I hope